and just like that, I knocked one game off my backlog and add another 7 to 10. While Dawn of Sorrow is not my first Castlevania game, it is my first Metroidvania in the series. This sentence will totally make sense to any fan of the series, but if you're like me, or at least like I was a few months ago, and you played maybe the first Castlevania, trying to understand how it fit into the Metroidvania genre, first off, it doesn't. And second, the game started to change with Symphony of the Night, which incorporated more of what you'd think of as Metroidvania elements. Hopefully I didn't butcher that explanation too badly, but if I did, I'm very sure that the comments will correct me and let me know. Anyway, when I played the first Castlevania a few months ago, it didn't land great for me. So going into Dawn of Sorrow, I wasn't sure that this series was really going to be for me. But I wanted to give the series one more try with one of the more modern entries, because pretty much every fan of the series suggests doing exactly that. And I'm so glad I did. I can't say if Dawn of Sorrow is actually a great one to start with, particularly given that it's a sequel to another entry in the series, but it totally worked for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed my playthrough. Real quick before I dig into the game, I did receive a free review code for the Dominus collection. This is actually how I ended up deciding to play Dawn of Sorrow, rather than one of the many other Castlevanias. And I chose that one because it was the oldest in the DS collection of games there. Also, if you end up enjoying the video, maybe like or subscribe. I hate to ask, you hate to hear it, but it really does help channels as much as everyone says. So, with that, I'll leave you alone. So, what makes Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow worth playing in 2024? First, it feels great to play. I was worried after playing the first Castlevania that the controls in the later entries may intentionally feel similar, like you were jumping a whip-wielding refrigerator. Luckily, these controls are super tight and intuitive. I played Dawn of Sorrow as part of the Castlevania Dominus collection on Steam, and this collection, just like all of Konami's other collections, is actually really well done. Playing this with an Xbox controller felt absolutely wonderful, and the collection includes all of those modern features you would like save states, multiple options to change up the UI, which actually is really important here, and so much more. I'll talk about the collection a little more at the end, but again, this just plays wonderfully, and honestly, I'm so glad I played it on PC rather than DS. At least for the most part. There's one area that is a little rough, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So that leads right into combat, which again, feels amazing here. You have plenty of mobility from the start, you are able to execute nice tight jumps and dodges, weapons, of which there are many, feel distinct, and the hit registration feels great. I will spend some time talking about the variety across the board, from enemies to weapons to everything, but the enemy variety here is very impressive, and you are constantly running into new enemy types that keep combat fresh. Simply put, every moment in combat was enjoyable. Even late game when you had to traverse earlier areas, choosing either to annihilate enemies or to use new abilities to just move past them, both still made dealing with these enemies really enjoyable. Not to mention, they still reward experience, so it was usually still worth killing them. Also, while talking about combat, I should mention that the boss battles are also fantastic pretty much across the board, except for one DS-era relic that I will talk about a little later. Bosses are challenging, but not that challenging. Early bosses were pretty easy one-shots. Mid-game gave me a little trouble with a death here or there, but that was mostly because of my self-imposed potion rationing that was, at the end of the day, not really worth it. Late game bosses do present a challenge, and a couple of them did give me 5 to 10 deaths. Overall, I really enjoyed these boss encounters, and I feel like the difficulty was pretty good. Another really impressive area of this game are all of the various systems and the variety. Normally, I wouldn't talk about these together, but it actually makes sense here because a few of these systems are actually connected to the others. So there is a fairly significant variety of weapons. Daggers, short swords, long swords, beefy two-handers, axes, fist weapons, spears, and much more. I absolutely love the variety. Even if I mostly got attached to the big two-handed sword and stuck with that, I really loved experimenting with the other weapons. So again, there's a lot of weapon variety, and then there's an upgrade system for those weapons as well, using souls. Specific souls to upgrade specific weapons. So with that, let's talk about souls. You sometimes acquire souls from enemies when they die. Some souls are more rare than other souls. Souls, in addition to being upgradable materials for weapons, all grant you a distinct ability when equipped, in one of 3 different slots. These abilities have so much variation. One of my go-to bullet abilities, which is one of the 3 slots, was throwing playing cards to damage enemies. I also occasionally summoned zombies. In another slot, I frequently used a soul that helped me grow a tail that would also let me damage enemies. Another soul basically was a slow fall. Yet another spawned skeletons that would slowly carry me across an area. Many of these abilities can be upgraded if you collect more of the same soul, and there are over 100 of these souls. That's right, there are over 100 different souls to collect with 100 different abilities. Which then brings us back to, yes, there are over 100 enemies to defeat. Some are essentially stronger versions of previous enemies, but many are not. Along the way, you're also collecting gold and items that you can sell for gold, which allow you to buy potions, weapons, and armor if you need them. All of these systems work so well together. Is it perfect? No. For example, the rarity on some of the souls make upgrading some of your weapons feel fairly grindy. Running the same section over and over attempting to get one of the more rare souls, I found to be a little annoying. But overall, I still really enjoyed how all of this worked together. So many of the weapons and different abilities really open up the options for different playstyles. Exploration and unlocking new areas here feels great as well, while doubling back to try to find a new path unlocked by a new ability can sometimes feel a little tedious, particularly if you can't remember which unexplored part of the map it was from. Overall, it's still very enjoyable. Visually, it's obvious that this was a DS game, but overall, it looks really good. I enjoyed some of the semi-3D backgrounds as you moved through the maps. Enemies, abilities, animation also looked fantastic. And then, as expected from the series, the music here is excellent as well. And the music includes several old remixes of older Castlevania tracks. There are also multiple endings for this game, and they are very different and unlock different game modes. I can't remember ever seeing this in a game. Slight spoiler for about 30 seconds. One of those modes is a Julius mode, where you can start the game again as Julius, foregoing any of the normal weapons or soul upgrades, but instead you start with a double jump and you have a whip. I played this mode for about 15 minutes and it felt really good to play as well. The double jump would allow you to tackle the game in a different order, and I just really liked what they did here. There is another mode as well that I won't bother spoiling, but overall, really impressed with how the endings were handled and all the different modes. So with all that said, there are a couple nitpicks and things I will call out. First, as I alluded to earlier, boss battles have a mechanic left over from the Nintendo DS that I absolutely hate. There is a magic seal system where in order to finish off a boss, you need to draw a seal. Presumably, this was done with the touchscreen on the DS and would have been slightly more intuitive. Here, you basically have to do a QuickTime button press, and at least in later battles, you don't get to see what the buttons are that you need to press on the first attempt. Instead, you rely on knowing a pattern. If you fail, you get another attempt, this time with it showing you the buttons to press, which makes it marginally better. But yeah, just overall this sucks. I really wish they'd given you the ability in this collection to just avoid it entirely, but if it's in there, I didn't manage to find it. I will admit it is manageable, and actually if you're quick, you could potentially save state right before you're prompted and try it multiple times that way, but I never actually managed to time it well enough to pull that off. So if you do fail, the boss regains some health, I'm guessing it's maybe around a third, and you have to continue the fight. Overall, I felt like this just really detracted from the boss fights. Another nitpick I have is the UI. I know it's because it's a DS game, and in some ways, having that extra DS screen information actually was very useful. However, I constantly found myself wanting that real estate for the game itself. I'm not sure there is a better option, and there are some ways to customize those screens and the layout, but overall, it's a little annoying to have that all over on the right side of your screen. Okay, the last nitpick, and this is 100% a me problem. As much as I love the endings, I also find it slightly annoying to think I'm about to finish a game, or in this case, do finish a game, only to find out that that wasn't really the ending, and I need to go back and change some things up. Some people will absolutely not realize this, and will accept one of those endings as the ending, and that's kind of a shame, because there's actually a lot more here. But for me, it's actually mostly about the fact that I like to plan my time, and I will sometimes push to finish a game that I think I'm almost done with, and then when it doesn't actually end, I'm a bit disappointed. But again, I freely admit that's a me problem. The story I didn't talk too much about because it's fine, it gets you from point A to point B, but I didn't really engage with it much. But to be fair, that could be because I hadn't played the earlier entry. So that pretty much wraps up Dawn of Sorrow. Fantastic game, I really enjoyed it, and basically recommend it to anyone wanting to get into the Castlevania series, or that has played some of the other entries in the series but not this one yet. Also, a couple quick notes on the Dominus collection itself. This collection features the 3 Nintendo DS games. It includes save states, button remapping, the ability to view art from some of the games, and play some of the soundtracks, stuff like that. In addition to the 3 DS games, it also includes 2 other games, or really 2 versions of one game. The Haunted Castle, which I believe was only released in Japan, and then The Haunted Castle Revisited, which is a remake of the 1988 Haunted Castle, which also apparently was released as part of this collection. This is a really impressive package, and honestly, I have only good things to say about all of the Castlevania collections Konami has put out so far. So with that, I'll leave it there. I may play another one from this collection in the near future. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.